Hi there. Welcome to Melted Stone, the spot for stories that grab you and won't let you go. If you love drama, surprises, and moments that make you say, no way, you're in the right place. Subscribe and dive into tales full of twists, bold moves, and endings you'll remember. This is Melted Stone. Hit the bell and let's get the story rolling.
You're quiet today.
You can forgive someone for hurting you, but not for making you hate yourself. The coffee tasted different that Tuesday morning. Bitter, like pennies mixed with dirt. Evan Braddock set the mug down and watched his wife Lena stir her own cup with mechanical precision. 44 years old, and he was just now learning what betrayal tasted like. "You're quiet today," Lena said without looking up from her phone. Her yoga mat was already rolled by the door, ready for her morning class. Same routine, every Tuesday and Thursday. Except Tuesdays were when the gym was closed for maintenance. Evan had checked. "Just thinking about the Patterson job," he lied, adjusting his work boots. 23 years running lumber crews in Providence Edge, and he'd never been a good liar. But these days, truth felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. Lena's phone buzzed. She smiled, the first real expression he'd seen from her in weeks. Her thumbs moved fast across the screen, typing something that made her bite her lower lip the way she used to when they were dating. "Who's that?" Evan asked. "Just Clara. She's stressed about the math test." Lena pocketed the phone too quickly. "I should get going. Don't want to be late." Their daughter was at school, had been for 2 hours. Evan nodded and watched his wife of 18 years gather her things. Watched her kiss his cheek with lips that felt like paper. Watched her drive away in the Honda he'd bought her last Christmas toward a yoga class that didn't exist. The house settled into its familiar silence. Outside, chainsaw buzz echoed from the mill down the valley. Inside, Evan sat at their kitchen table and pulled out his phone. 3 missed calls from his foreman, 2 texts about equipment delivery, normal Tuesday stuff. But nothing about this felt normal anymore. He opened the photo gallery and scrolled to last weekend's pictures. Clara's 16th birthday party. Lena laughing with the neighbors, her hand resting on Colby Nash's shoulder just a second too long. Colby, the gym owner with the perfect teeth and the motivational quotes tattooed down his forearms. Colby, who'd shown up uninvited and somehow ended up helping serve cake. Evan zoomed in on that photo. Lena's fingers, not just resting, but gripping. Colby's smile, not friendly, but predatory. His phone rang. Work. "Braddock?" "Boss, we got a problem with the hydraulics on the loader." Jimmy's voice crackled through. "Things leaking fluid all over the yard. I'll be there in 20. Evan closed the photo and grabbed his keys. Some problems you could fix with the right tools and enough elbow grease. Others required a different kind of approach entirely. The drive to Cascadia Lumber took him past Nash Fitness. Evan slowed as he approached the glass-fronted building. The parking lot was empty except for a black Dodge Ram with mud flaps and a "Coexist" bumper sticker. Colby's truck. The sign on the door read "Closed. Equipment Maintenance." Evan pulled into the Starbucks across the street and ordered black coffee he didn't want, found a seat by the window, and waited. At 9:47 a.m., Lena's Honda pulled into the gym lot. She sat in her car for 3 minutes checking her makeup in the rearview mirror. Then she walked to Colby's truck. Evan couldn't see through the Ram's tinted windows, but he didn't need to. The truck rocked slightly, once, twice, then stillness. He drove to work with shaking hands and the taste of pennies still thick in his mouth. "Jesus, boss, you look like hell," Jimmy said when Evan walked into the office trailer. "You getting sick?" "Something like that." Evan hung his hard hat on the peg and pulled out the maintenance log. "Show me the loader." They spent the morning bleeding hydraulic lines and replacing seals, physical work that required focus. Evan had always been good with his hands, good at fixing things that were broken. It was people who gave him trouble. Around lunch, his phone buzzed, text from Lena. "Running errands after yoga. Home by 3. The yoga class she wasn't taking ended at 10:30. "Jimmy, I'm taking the afternoon off," Evan said, wiping grease from his fingers. "You sure? We got that delivery from Tacoma coming in around 4. "Handle it." Evan was already walking toward his truck. "I got some personal business to take care of." Instead of going home, He drove to his mother's house on Elm Street. Judith Braddock answered the door in her housecoat, cigarette dangling from her lips like a permanent fixture. Evan, what brings you by on a workday? Need to talk to someone, Ma. She studied his face with those pale blue eyes that missed nothing. Come on in. Coffee's fresh. Judith's kitchen smelled like menthol cigarettes and disappointment. She poured 2 cups of coffee strong enough to wake the dead and sat across from him at the table where he'd eaten 1,000 childhood dinners. What's eating you, son? Evan stared into his cup. You ever suspect Dad was stepping out on you? Judith's laugh was harsh as sandpaper. Your father? That man couldn't lie to save his soul. Why? You having troubles with Lena? Maybe. I don't know. She's been different lately. Distant. Different how? Secretive. Always on her phone, making excuses. Evan looked up. Going places she says she's going, but she's not actually going there. Judith took a long drag from her cigarette. Maybe you're not giving her what she needs at home. The words hit like a slap. What's that supposed to mean? Means marriage is work, Evan. You can't just coast through on automatic pilot and expect everything to stay the same. When's the last time you took that girl somewhere nice? Bought her flowers? Made her feel special? I work 60 hours a week to keep us comfortable. I coach Clara's softball team. I fix everything that breaks in that house. That's not what I'm talking about, and you know it. Judith stubbed out her cigarette. Your father had the same problem. Thought being a good provider was the same as being a good husband. Maybe if he'd paid more attention to what I needed instead of what needed fixing around here, he wouldn't have died lonely in that hospital bed. Evan felt the familiar knot of anger form in his chest. His father had worked himself to passing building Braddock Construction from nothing, and all Judith ever did was criticize him for it. So, if Lena's cheating, it's my fault? I didn't say that. But if she is, maybe ask yourself why. Judith lit another cigarette. Of course, you could be imagining things. Wouldn't be the first time you got paranoid about something. I'm not paranoid. No. Remember when you were convinced your high school girlfriend was seeing Tommy Marsh? Followed her around for weeks like some kind of stalker? Turned out she was planning your surprise birthday party. Evan remembered. He also remembered how that relationship ended 2 months later when she actually did start seeing Tommy Marsh. This is different. Maybe. Or maybe you're looking for problems that ain't there because you're scared of losing what you got. Judith blew smoke toward the ceiling. Either way, acting suspicious and jealous ain't gonna help. You want to save your marriage? Try being the kind of man she married in the first place. Evan drove home with his mother's words ringing in his ears. Maybe she was right. Maybe he was seeing things that weren't there. Maybe 18 years of marriage had made him take Lena for granted. But when he pulled into his driveway at 2:30, Lena's car was already there. She was in the kitchen, putting groceries away. Her yoga clothes were gone, replaced by jeans and a sweater. Her hair was damp from a recent shower. Hey, babe, you're home early. Took the afternoon off. Thought maybe we could spend some time together. Something flickered across her face. Annoyance? Fear? It was gone too fast to tell. That's sweet, but I've got a client consultation at 4. One of the ladies from class wants to discuss private sessions. Which lady? Sarah Mitchell. You don't know her. Evan nodded. Maybe tonight then. We could order Chinese, watch a movie like we used to. Clara's got that study group, remember? I promised I'd drive her and pick her up. Lena closed the refrigerator and faced him. Is everything okay? You seem clingy today. Clingy, like he was the problem for wanting to spend time with his wife. Just wanted to see you. Is that a crime? No, it's sweet, just unexpected. She kissed his cheek again, that same papery feeling. I should get ready for my appointment. Evan watched her disappear upstairs. Through the kitchen window, he could see into the Hendersons' backyard next door. Jim Henderson was grilling burgers while his wife Karen sat at the patio table. 30 years married, and they still held hands when they walked the dog. Evan used to think he and Lena would be like that someday. His phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Stop looking for things that aren't there. His blood turned to ice water. He stared at the screen, reading the message again. Who had this number? How did they know he was looking for anything? Evan typed back, Who is this? No response. He saved the number and ran upstairs. Lena was in their bedroom, changing clothes with the door closed. Evan could hear her moving around, but couldn't make out any sounds of a phone conversation. Honey, you okay in there? Fine, just deciding what to wear. Evan went to his home office and opened his laptop. His brother Rick worked cybersecurity for Boeing and had taught him a few tricks over the years. Not enough to be a hacker, but enough to recover deleted files and track internet history. He plugged in Lena's iPad, which she'd left charging on the kitchen counter. It synced automatically with her iCloud account, something she'd set up years ago and probably forgotten about. The device showed her recent activity: text messages, photos, browser history. Most of it was boring. Pinterest recipes, yoga videos, online shopping. But then he found the deleted folder. Inside were photos he'd never seen. Lena in positions and poses that definitely weren't yoga. Lena wearing lingerie he'd never seen her in. Lena with someone else's hands on her body. Evan's vision blurred. He gripped the desk to keep from falling over. The photos were time-stamped over the past 6 weeks, all taken during her supposed yoga classes. There were text messages, too. Conversations between Lena and someone saved in her contacts as, "Trainer, can't wait to see you Thursday. Wear the blue set. My husband's getting suspicious. We need to be more careful. Don't worry about him." Guys like that never do anything. Still makes me nervous. What if he finds out? Then you leave him. Simple as that. You deserve better than some lumber monkey who doesn't appreciate what he has. It's not that easy. There's Clara to think about. And the house. We'll figure it out. Trust me. The timestamp on that last exchange was from this morning, while Evan was fixing hydraulics and questioning his own sanity. He copied everything to a flash drive and deleted the sync history. His hands moved on autopilot while his brain tried to process what he'd seen. 18 years. 18 years of marriage, and she talked about leaving him like she was canceling a gym membership. Evan? Lena's voice from downstairs. I'm heading out. Be back by 6. Okay, he called back, surprised his voice worked. He heard her car start and pull away. Then he opened a bottle of Jack Daniels and sat in his office chair, staring at photos of his wife with another man. The bourbon burned, but not as much as the truth. His phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Now you know. Question is, what are you going to do about it? This time Evan didn't reply. He had a better question. Who else knew about Lena's affair, and why were they telling him? By the time Clara got home from school, Evan had consumed half the bottle and formed the beginning of a plan. Not revenge, not yet, just information gathering. If Lena wanted to play games, he needed to understand the rules first. Dad, you okay? Clara dropped her backpack by the door and studied his face. At 16, she had her mother's sharp eyes and her father's stubborn chin. You look weird. Just tired, kiddo. Long day at work. Where's Mom? Client consultation. She'll be back for dinner. Clara nodded and headed for the stairs. I'm going to Jessica's to study. Mom's picking me up at 8. After she left, Evan showered and put on clean clothes. He needed to look normal when Lena got home. Needed to act like everything was fine while he figured out his next move. But first, he had a phone call to make. Rick, it's Evan. Yeah, I know it's been a while. Listen, I need to ask you about something technical. Hypothetically. His brother listened without judgment as Evan explained his situation. Rick had been through his own divorce 5 years earlier, so he understood the landscape. You want my advice? Document everything, but don't confront her yet. Once she knows you know, she'll start hiding evidence and building her own case. You need to be smarter than that. What kind of case? Custody, alimony, property division. If she's been planning this affair for months, she's probably been planning the exit strategy too. You need to get ahead of it. Rick walked him through some basic digital forensics. How to install keyloggers, how to track GPS locations, how to recover deleted data. Not illegal if it was on devices and accounts that Evan had legal access to as her husband. But, Evan, be careful. This kind of surveillance can become addictive. And if you're not careful, you'll become the bad guy in the divorce proceedings. After the call, Evan installed monitoring software on their shared home computer and placed a small GPS tracker under Lena's car. Both were legal gray areas, but not enough to get him in serious trouble. By the time Lena returned home, Evan was making dinner and acting like nothing had changed. How was your consultation? He asked, stirring pasta sauce. Good. Sarah's interested in twice-weekly sessions. Lena set her purse on the counter. Smells good in here. Clara's favorite. Figured we could have a nice family dinner. Lena smiled, and for a moment she looked like the woman he'd married. That sounds perfect. But Evan noticed she kept her phone face down during dinner and excused herself twice to check messages. Both times, she claimed it was work-related. That night, as they lay in bed, Lena turned away from him when he tried to initiate closeness. I'm tired, honey. Rain check? It was the same thing she'd been saying for weeks. Evan stared at the ceiling and listened to his wife's breathing gradually slow to sleep. Outside, wind moved through the pine trees with a sound like distant conversation. He thought about the photos on her phone, about the text messages, about 18 years of his life that were apparently worth less than whatever she was getting from Colby Nash. Tomorrow, he decided he would start getting answers. The next morning, Evan followed Lena to her yoga class again. This time, he was prepared. He had a camera with a telephoto lens and a clear view of the gym parking lot from the coffee shop. Lena arrived at 9:30. Colby's truck was already there. At 9:45, they came out together. Colby had his hand on the small of Lena's back, guiding her toward his truck. They drove to a small motel on Highway 16, about 10 miles outside town. Evan parked across the street and waited. 47 minutes later, they emerged from room 237. Lena looked satisfied in a way Evan hadn't seen in months. Colby looked smug. Evan took pictures of everything: the license plates, the motel sign, the timestamp on his camera. Then he followed them back to town, staying far enough behind to avoid detection. Instead of going to work, Evan drove to the courthouse and met with Janet Morrison, the family law attorney his brother had recommended. I need to know where I stand legally, he told her, handing over the flash drive with all the evidence he'd collected. Janet was in her 50s, with gray hair and the weary expression of someone who'd seen too many marriages implode. This is pretty damning evidence, she said after reviewing the photos and text messages. Washington is a no-fault divorce state, so infidelity won't affect property division much. But it could impact custody if you can prove she's been neglecting your daughter's welfare. What about alimony? She might be entitled to some, depending on the length of the marriage and income disparity. But if you can prove she's been planning this affair and preparing to leave, it might reduce what she's entitled to. Janet leaned back in her chair. My advice? Don't let her know you're aware of the affair, not yet. Keep documenting everything, but also start protecting your assets. Move money to accounts she doesn't have access to. Change passwords. Cancel joint credit cards. Is that legal? As long as you're not hiding marital assets, yes. You're just preventing her from spending community property without your knowledge. Evan left the lawyer's office with a list of actions to take and a retainer agreement in his pocket. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he had some control over the situation, but that feeling didn't last long. When he got home, Clara was sitting at the kitchen table with tears in her eyes. Dad, we need to talk. Evan's stomach dropped. What's wrong, kiddo? Mom told me you've been acting weird lately, following her around, checking her phone, accusing her of things. Clara's voice shook. She's scared of you. The words hit like a physical blow. Clara, that's not... She showed me the browser history on your computer. All those searches about divorce lawyers and surveillance equipment. Clara stood up, backing away from him. How could you do this to our family? Evan realized his mistake too late. He'd been so focused on catching Lena that he hadn't covered his digital tracks well enough. She'd been monitoring him just as much as he'd been monitoring her. Honey, you don't understand. Your mother... I understand that you don't trust the woman who's been nothing but loyal to you for 18 years. Clara's voice was getting louder. I understand that instead of talking to her about whatever's bothering you, you decided to spy on her like some kind of stalker. She's having an affair, Clara. The words hung in the air like smoke. Clara stared at him. That's a horrible thing to say. It's true. I have proof. Proof of what? That she has friends you don't approve of? That she goes places without telling you every detail? Dad, that's not cheating. That's being a normal person. Evan pulled out his phone, intending to show her the photos. But looking at his daughter's face, so young, so convinced of her mother's innocence, he couldn't do it. Clara, no. I don't want to hear it. She grabbed her backpack from the counter. I'm going to stay at Grandma's tonight. Maybe you can use the time to think about what kind of husband and father you want to be. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Evan sat alone in his kitchen, surrounded by the debris of his life. On the counter, Lena's phone buzzed with a new message. Without thinking, he picked it up. The text was from Colby. He knows. Time to move to Plan B. Evan's blood ran cold. Plan B? Another message appeared. Already talked to Clara. She's on our side. Just need to handle the money situation and we're clear. Then, meet me at the usual place. We need to discuss the timeline. Evan screenshotted the messages and forwarded them to his own phone. Then he deleted the screenshots from Lena's device and put it back exactly where he'd found it. Plan B. They had a Plan B. He thought about Clara's tears, about her conviction that he was the villain in this story. How long had Lena been poisoning their daughter against him? How long had she been planning this exit strategy? Evan opened his laptop and started researching Colby Nash. What he found made his situation even worse. Colby wasn't just a gym owner. He had connections to some unsavory people in the area. 3 years ago, he'd been questioned in connection with a pill trafficking investigation. Never charged, but the association was there. He also owed back taxes to the IRS and had 2 restraining orders filed against him by ex-girlfriends. This was the man his wife was planning to leave him for. Evan's phone rang, unknown number. Hello? You're moving too slow. The voice was male, gravelly, unfamiliar. She's about to disappear with your kid and half your money. Who is this? Someone who knows what Colby Nash is capable of. You want to save your family? You better start thinking like him. What does that mean? Means nice guys finish last, Braddock. You want to win this game? You better learn the rules. The line went dead. Evan stared at his phone, mind racing. Someone else was pulling strings in this situation. Someone who wanted him to know about the affair, who wanted him to take action. But why? He spent the next hour making phone calls. The first was to his bank, transferring money from joint accounts to a personal account Lena didn't have access to. The second was to his brother Rick, asking for more sophisticated surveillance equipment. The third was to Janet Morrison, asking about expedited divorce proceedings. By the time Lena came home, Evan had taken the first steps toward protecting himself. But he also knew the real war was just beginning. Where's Clara? Lena asked, setting her purse on the counter. At your mother's. She's upset about something. Lena's expression didn't change. Upset about what? She thinks I don't trust you. Do you? The question hung between them like a challenge. Evan looked at his wife, really looked at her. The woman he'd married had been soft around the edges, quick to laugh, generous with affection. This woman was sharp and calculating, every expression carefully controlled. I don't know anymore, he said finally. Lena nodded like she'd expected that answer. Maybe we should talk to someone, a marriage counselor? Is that what you want? I want to save our marriage, Evan. The question is whether you do. It was a masterful piece of manipulation. Put him on the defensive, make him the one who had to prove his commitment. But Evan was done playing by her rules. Sure, he said. Let's try counseling. Lena smiled, the first genuine expression he'd seen from her in days. I'll make some appointments tomorrow. That night, they slept in the same bed for the first time in weeks, but Evan lay awake listening to Lena breathe, knowing that everything she'd said was a lie. The counseling sessions would be another opportunity for her to build her case, to portray him as an unstable, controlling husband who drove her into another man's arms. But 2 could play that game. The next morning, Evan called in sick to work and drove to Seattle. He had meetings with a private investigator, a forensic accountant, and a different divorce attorney. By the end of the day, he had a team of professionals working to protect his interests. He also had confirmation of something he'd suspected. Lena had been planning this for months. She'd opened her own bank account, taken out credit cards in her name only, and had been slowly transferring money from their joint savings to accounts he couldn't access. The private investigator, a former police officer named Marcus Webb, was particularly thorough. Your wife's been very busy, Webb said, sliding a file across his desk. Bank records show regular cash withdrawals that don't match her stated expenses. Credit card bills for hotels, restaurants, and purchases that she's not bringing home. And this Colby Nash character? He's bad news. How bad? The pill thing was just the tip of the iceberg. He's suspected of running an operation that launders money through his gym. Small-time stuff, but still serious. He's also got a history of targeting married women, especially ones with assets. Evan felt sick. You think this is about money? I think your wife got seduced by someone who saw dollar signs. Question is, how far is she willing to go to get what she wants? That question was answered the next day when Evan came home to find police cars in his driveway. Detective Roy Castor was waiting in his living room, along with two uniformed officers. Lena sat on the couch, dabbing her eyes with tissues. "Mr. Braddock, we need to ask you some questions about your wife's allegations." Evan's mouth went dry. "What allegations?" "She claims you've been stalking her, threatening her, and monitoring her communications without consent. She also says you've been drinking heavily and acting erratically." Evan looked at Lena. She wouldn't meet his eyes. "I haven't threatened anyone." "You installed surveillance software on her devices?" Evan glanced at his lawyer's business card tucked in his wallet. "I'd like to call my attorney before answering any questions." Detective Castor nodded. "That's your right, but I need to inform you that your wife has requested a restraining order. Until the hearing, you can't contact her or come within 500 feet of her residence. This is my house. Not anymore. At least not until the court sorts this out." Castor's voice was sympathetic but firm. "I'd suggest you find somewhere else to stay for the next few days." As Evan packed a bag, he could hear Lena in the kitchen, making phone calls, telling people her version of the story, painting herself as the sufferer of an increasingly unstable husband. The plan was already in motion, and he was 3 steps behind. Evan checked into a motel on the outskirts of town, not the same one where Lena met Colby, but close enough to feel like cosmic irony. He sat on the lumpy bed and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so fast. His phone buzzed. Text from the unknown number again. "Told you she was smarter than you thought. Still want to play nice guy?" This time, Evan responded, "Who are you? What do you want?" "Meet me at Denny's on Route 16, midnight. Come alone." Against his better judgment, Evan drove to the meeting. The diner was nearly empty except for a few truck drivers and the overnight staff. In a corner booth sat a man in his 50s with graying hair and tattoos covering both arms. He looked like he'd spent time in prison. "Lenny Dawes," the man said as Evan approached. "Have a seat. You're the one who's been texting me." "Guilty." Lenny gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Coffee's crap, but it's hot." Evan sat down, studying the stranger's face. "Why are you involved in this?" "Because Colby Nash is bad for business. And because I don't like seeing good men get played by whores and pretty boys." The word made Evan flinch. Whatever Lena had done, she was still his wife. "You don't know my wife." "I know enough. I know she's been planning this divorce for 6 months. I know she's been moving money around and building a case to make you look like an unstable drunk. I know Colby's promised to take care of her after she leaves you, but what she doesn't know is that he's planning to disappear once he gets his hands on your assets." Lenny leaned forward. "I also know that in about 2 weeks, your wife is going to claim you threatened to eliminate her. She's going to show the cops a fake text message that will land you in jail for domestic terrorism. While you're locked up, she and Colby are going to clean out your accounts and disappear." Evan's blood turned to ice. "How do you know all this?" "Because I've seen Colby's playbook before. This ain't his first rodeo. There was a guy up in Bellingham 2 years ago, ended up losing everything. Another one in Spokane. Both times, Colby found a married woman with assets, seduced her, convinced her to leave her husband, then vanished once the money was transferred." "Why are you telling me this?" Lenny's smile was cold. "Because Colby owes me money. A lot of money. And I figure if his current scam falls apart, he might be motivated to pay his debts." "So this is about money for you too?" "Everything's about money, son. Question is whether you're going to let them steal yours." Evan stared into his coffee cup. 2 days ago, he'd been a lumber foreman with a troubled marriage. Now he was sitting in a diner at midnight, talking to a criminal about how to outmaneuver his cheating wife. "What do you suggest I do?" "Stop playing defense. Start playing offense." Lenny slid a business card across the table. "You need help, call that number. But understand, once you cross that line, there's no going back to being the nice guy." Evan pocketed the card without looking at it. "What kind of help? The kind that evens the playing field." That night, back in his motel room, Evan stared at the card for a long time. It was plain white with just a phone number, no name or business. He thought about everything he'd learned, about the elaborate trap being built around him. He thought about Clara, convinced that her father was the villain. About 18 years of marriage, that meant nothing. about a system that seemed designed to reward liars and punish honest men. At 3 a.m., he made the call. Yeah, Lenny gave me this number. What do you need? Information about Colby Nash and what he's planning. That'll cost you. How much? 5,000 cash. Evan closed his eyes. It was money they couldn't afford to lose, but it was less than Lena would take in the divorce. Done. Good. There's a guy named Marcus Webb, private investigator. He's been asking questions about Nash, which means someone's paying him to do it. That's someone you? Yes. Well, you're about to get a lot more than you paid for. Meet me tomorrow night, same place. Bring the money and something to write with. The line went dead. Evan lay back on the motel bed and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere across town, his wife was sleeping in their bed, probably texting Colby about how well their plan was working. In a few days, she would make her move, and he would lose everything, unless he stopped playing by the rules she'd written. The next evening, Evan returned to Denny's with an envelope full of cash. Lenny was waiting in the same booth, but this time he wasn't alone. A woman in her 30s sat across from him, nervous and chain-smoking. "This is Mia," Lenny said as Evan sat down. "She works at the Paradise Motel. Tell him what you told me." Mia looked around nervously before speaking. "Your wife and that gym guy, they've been meeting in room 237 twice a week for about 2 months. But that's not the weird part." "What's the weird part?" "The weird part is they're not just having sex, they're planning something. I clean the rooms and sometimes I hear them talking about bank accounts and custody papers and other stuff." "What other stuff?" Mia stubbed out her cigarette. "About making you disappear." Evan's blood went cold. "Disappear how?" "I don't know exactly. But I heard them talking about making it look like you ran off. Like you couldn't handle the divorce and just took off somewhere." Mia lit another cigarette with shaking hands. "The gym guy kept saying it would be cleaner that way, less questions." Lenny leaned forward. "There's more. Show him the photos." Mia reluctantly handed over her phone. The screen showed several pictures taken through a partially open motel room door. Lena and Colby in various stages of undress, but also shots of them looking at documents spread across the bed. "I took these last week," Mia explained. "Figured they might be worth something someday." Evan studied the images. In one, he could clearly see bank statements and what looked like life insurance documents. In another, Colby was holding what appeared to be a fake ID with Evan's photo on it. "Jesus Christ," Evan whispered. "It gets worse," Lenny said. "Colby's got connections to some people who specialize in making problems disappear permanently." The implication hit Evan like a physical blow. They weren't just planning to steal his money and frame him. They were planning to eliminate him. "I need copies of these photos," Evan said, surprised by how calm his voice sounded. "Already done." Lenny handed him a flash drive. "Everything's on there. Photos, audio recordings, copies of the documents they were looking at. Enough to bury them both." Evan pocketed the drive. "What do you want in return?" "Simple. When this is over, Colby pays what he owes me, with interest. And if I don't want to play this game?" Lenny's expression hardened. "Then, in about 10 days, you'll be reported missing. A week after that, they'll find your body in the woods, and it'll look like self-destruction. Your wife will inherit everything, including your life insurance. She'll grieve publicly for a few months, then move somewhere warm with her new boyfriend." The casual way he described Evan's homicide made it clear this wasn't speculation. This was a plan already in motion. "How do I stop it?" "You turn the tables. Make them the sufferers instead of the suffererizers." Lenny slid another card across the table. "But first, you need to disappear for real. Make them think their plan is working." Evan looked at the card. It was for a cabin rental service in the mountains. "There's a place about 40 miles north of here, off the grid, no cell service, no paper trail if you pay cash. You hole up there for a few days while I handle some details. When you come back, you'll be ready for war." "What kind of details?" "The kind you don't want to know about until after they're done." Evan thought about Clara, about the restraining order, about the elaborate web of lies being spun around him. A week ago, he'd been a man who solved problems with honest work and good intentions. Now, he was contemplating actions that would change him forever. "If I do this, there's no going back, is there?" "Nope. But the alternative is being dead and having everyone remember you as the unstable husband who couldn't handle divorce." Lenny's eyes were cold as winter. "Your choice, but make it fast." Clock's ticking. Evan stood up and walked out of the diner without saying another word. But he kept the flash drive and the address card. That night, he drove to the cabin Lenny had recommended. It was a small, weathered structure surrounded by dense pine forest, accessible only by a dirt road that barely qualified as more than a trail. The owner was an old man who asked no questions and accepted cash payment for a week's rental. For 3 days, Evan sat in that cabin and wrestled with his conscience. He reviewed the evidence on the flash drive dozens of times. Audio recordings of Lena and Colby discussing timeline details, bank transfers, and contingency plans. Photos of forged documents, recorded phone conversations with people who specialized in making problems disappear. The evidence was overwhelming. His wife was not just cheating on him. She was planning to have him eliminated. On the 4th day, his phone received a single bar of signal long enough for a text message to come through. It was from Clara. "Dad, where are you? Mom's really worried. She thinks you might hurt yourself. Please come home." Even from 40 miles away, Lena was still manipulating their daughter. Evan typed back, "I'm fine, just need some time to think." Clara's response came immediately. "Mom says you took money from the bank accounts." She had to borrow money from Uncle Dave to pay bills. What's going on? So that was Lena's next move. Portray him as financially irresponsible, someone who would steal from his own family in a moment of crisis. Evan drove back to town that evening, but he didn't go to the motel. Instead, he parked outside Nash Fitness and waited. At 9:30 p.m., Colby's truck pulled into the lot, but instead of Lena getting out, it was 2 men Evan didn't recognize. They looked like the kind of people who solved problems with violence. Evan followed them at a distance as they drove to a warehouse on the industrial side of town. Through a window, he could see them meeting with Colby and 2 other men. Money changed hands. One of the strangers handed Colby what looked like a small electronic device. Evan took photos with his telephoto lens, then retreated to a safe distance to make a phone call. Marcus Webb. "It's Evan Braddock. I need you to run license plates on 2 vehicles." He read off the numbers from the strangers' cars. "At this hour, this better be important. They just paid my wife's boyfriend for something that looked like a tracking device. I think they're moving forward with their plan." Webb was quiet for a moment. "Where are you now?" "Outside the warehouse district, Industrial Road." "Get out of there, now." If they're bringing in outside help, things are about to get serious. Evan drove back to his motel, mind racing. Whatever was going to happen, it was happening soon. The next morning, he got a call from Detective Castor. "Mr. Braddock, we need to talk. Your wife filed another complaint last night. She says you've been following her and making threatening phone calls." "I haven't called her once." "Can you prove that?" "Phone records, witnesses, anything?" Evan thought about the burner phone Lenny had given him, about the calls he'd made from the mountains where there was no cell service. "I've been out of town." "No cell coverage." "Where exactly?" Evan gave him the address of the cabin. It wasn't much of an alibi, but it was something. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you," Castor said. "Your wife seems genuinely afraid. And some of the evidence she's showing me, it's concerning." "What evidence?" "Text messages, threatening ones, sent from your phone number." Evan's stomach dropped. "I didn't send any threatening messages." "Maybe not, but someone using your number did. I suggest you get a lawyer and figure out how to prove these messages are fake, because if your wife presses charges, you're looking at serious jail time." After the call, Evan sat in his motel room staring at his phone. Somehow, they'd managed to send threatening messages that appeared to come from his number. The technical sophistication of their plan was staggering. He called Lenny. "They're moving faster than we expected," Lenny said after Evan explained the situation. "Good news is, we're ready to move too." "What's the plan?" "You're going to give them exactly what they want." "You're going to disappear." "What do you mean?" "I mean, tonight, Evan Braddock is going to have a breakdown. He's going to send some very disturbing text messages to his wife, and then he's going to drive his truck to the old logging bridge over Devil's Creek. The truck's going to go off the bridge, and when they find it in the morning, there's going to be no body." Evan felt sick. "You want me to fake my own passing?" "I want you to let them think their plan worked. While they're celebrating and getting sloppy, we're going to gather evidence of their conspiracy. Then, when the time is right, you're going to come back from the dead and destroy them." "That's insane." So is getting homicided by your cheating wife your choice? That evening, Evan drove to a storage unit he'd rented under a false name. Inside were supplies Lenny had provided: camping gear, non-perishable food, a different vehicle with temporary plates, and clothes that would help him blend in during his time as a dead man. At 11 p.m., following Lenny's instructions, he drove his truck to Devil's Creek Bridge. The structure was old and wooden, spanning a deep ravine with fast-moving water below. Local legends said the creek was bottomless, though Evan knew it was only about 30 feet deep. He parked the truck at the edge of the bridge and got out. Using tools Lenny had provided, he disabled the emergency brake and put the transmission in neutral. Then he opened the driver's door and left it ajar, as if someone had jumped out at the last second. With the truck balanced precariously on the bridge's edge, Evan gave it a push. The vehicle rolled forward and plunged into the darkness below, hitting the water with a tremendous splash. From his hiding spot in the trees, Evan watched the truck sink beneath the surface. In the morning, when someone reported the crash, searchers would find vehicle debris but no body. The assumption would be that the current had carried him downstream. For all practical purposes, Evan Braddock was now dead. Over the next week, hiding in a hunter's cabin deeper in the mountains, Evan monitored the situation through a police scanner and updates from Lenny. The truck was discovered at dawn by a jogger. Search and rescue teams combed the creek for 3 days, but found no body. The working theory was that Evan had committed self-destruction, overwhelmed by his failing marriage and legal troubles. Lena played the grieving widow perfectly. She gave tearful interviews to local news, talking about her husband's struggle with depression and alcohol. She mentioned the threatening text messages, the erratic behavior, the mounting financial pressure. She painted a picture of a man who'd simply snapped under pressure. Clara was devastated. Through binoculars, Evan watched his daughter break down at his memorial service, supported by relatives and friends who had no idea they were mourning a man who was very much alive. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done, watching his daughter grieve while he hid in the woods like a fugitive. But it was also educational. Within 48 hours of his supposed passing, Lena had contacted a lawyer about expediting the life insurance claim. Within a week, she was seen having dinner with Colby at an expensive restaurant in Seattle. The Grieving Widow Act only lasted as long as there were cameras around. Lenny provided regular updates on their activities. With Evan out of the picture, Lena and Colby had moved into his house and were making plans to sell it. They'd also started liquidating other assets, claiming financial hardship due to the breadwinner's sudden passing. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd gotten cocky. On day 8 of his supposed passing, Evan received a package delivered to his hideout. Inside were high-resolution photos of Lena and Colby celebrating at a private party. They were laughing, drinking champagne, and clearly not grieving anything. In one photo, Colby was holding up a newspaper with the headline, "Local man presumed dead in creek accident," while making a toast. "Time to come back from the dead," Lenny's note said. But Evan had his own ideas about timing. He'd spent 8 days thinking about what he wanted to achieve. It wasn't enough to expose them. It wasn't enough to reclaim his assets. He wanted them to suffer the way they'd made him suffer. He wanted complete destruction. 2 weeks after his supposed passing, on a foggy Thursday morning, Evan made his first appearance as a ghost. Lena was leaving the house, his house, when she saw a figure standing across the street. The person was too far away to see clearly through the fog, but something about the silhouette made her stop and stare. The figure raised a hand in what might have been a wave or a warning, then disappeared into the mist. Lena convinced herself she'd imagined it. Grief did strange things to people's minds. But the next day, there was a bouquet of flowers on her doorstep. No card, no delivery slip. Just flowers that looked exactly like the ones from her wedding bouquet 18 years earlier. The day after that, someone left a photo under her windshield wiper. It was a picture of her and Evan on their honeymoon, a photo that should have been in their bedroom dresser. Colby tried to calm her down. "It's probably just some friend of his being weird about the passing. People grieve in strange ways." But Lena knew better. Those flowers, that photo, someone was sending her a very specific message. On the 4th day of psychological warfare, Evan escalated. He broke into the house while Lena and Colby were out and rearranged things, not dramatically, just enough to be noticeable. He moved Evan's favorite coffee mug from the cabinet to the kitchen counter. He left the bathroom toilet seat up, the way Evan always had. He moved one of Evan's books from the shelf to the nightstand. When Lena came home and noticed the changes, she called the police. "Someone's been in my house," she told Detective Castor. "They moved things around, but they didn't steal anything." "Any signs of forced entry?" "No, but I'm sure someone was here." Castor was sympathetic, but limited in what he could do. "With everything you've been through, maybe your mind is playing tricks on you. Grief can—" "I'm not grieving," Lena snapped, then caught herself. "I mean, I am grieving, but I'm not crazy. Someone was in my house." That night, Lena didn't sleep. She sat in the living room with a baseball bat, watching the windows and jumping at every sound. Evan, hidden in the woods behind the house, watched her through binoculars. For the first time in months, Lena looked scared and vulnerable. It was a good start. Over the next week, he continued the campaign. Anonymous phone calls that hung up when she answered. Her car mysteriously unlocked in the morning with the radio tuned to the station she and Evan used to listen to. A single red rose left on his grave every day, even though the cemetery was supposedly secured. Colby was getting nervous too. "Maybe we should leave town for a while. Take a trip somewhere warm until this weirdness dies down." But Lena refused. "I'm not running away from ghost stories and coincidences. Evan is dead. We both saw the truck go into the creek." That's when Evan decided to reveal himself. It was a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after his supposed passing. Lena was having coffee at their kitchen table when she looked up and saw him standing in the backyard. Not a silhouette this time, not a distant figure. Evan Braddock, very much alive, very much real, staring at her through the sliding glass door. Lena dropped her coffee mug. It shattered on the floor in a spray of ceramic and hot liquid. Evan smiled and tapped on the glass. Lena screamed. By the time Colby came running from upstairs, Evan was gone. But his message was clear. He was alive. He knew everything, and he was coming for them. "We need to run," Colby said after Lena explained what she'd seen. "Right now. Today. We can't run, don't you understand? If he's alive, everything we did—" Lena's voice trailed off as the implications hit her. The insurance fraud, the fake self-destruction, the transferred assets, all of it was now criminal conspiracy. "Then we finish what we started," Colby said grimly. "For real this time." But Evan was already 3 steps ahead of them. While they'd been celebrating his passing and spending his money, he'd been building an airtight case against them. Every conversation had been recorded. Every financial transaction had been documented. Every piece of evidence of their conspiracy had been gathered and secured. More importantly, he'd shared copies of everything with Detective Castor, the FBI, the IRS, and 3 different news organizations. The morning after his backyard appearance, Lena woke up to find FBI agents and local police surrounding her house. "Lena Braddock, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit homicide," Detective Castor said as he handcuffed her on her front lawn. Colby tried to run out the back door but found Lenny Dawes waiting for him with 2 very large friends. "Going somewhere?" Lenny asked pleasantly. As the police cars drove away with Lena and Colby in custody, Evan emerged from his hiding spot across the street. Clara was there too, standing next to a social worker and looking shell-shocked. "Dad?" she whispered when she saw him. "Everyone said you were dead." "I was," Evan said, walking toward his daughter. "For a while I was dead, but I got better." Clara ran to him and hugged him so hard he thought his ribs might crack. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I didn't know. I didn't understand what was really happening." "It's not your fault, kiddo." "Your mother is very good at making people believe what she wants them to believe." Over Clara's shoulder, Evan could see his house, empty now except for the evidence teams gathering proof of Lena and Colby's crimes. The life he'd built there was over, but maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. "What happens now?" Clara asked. "Now we start over. Clean slate, just you and me." "What about Mom?" Evan looked at the police cars disappearing around the corner. "Your mother made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences." The trials were a media sensation. The case had everything: infidelity, insurance fraud, faked self-destruction, conspiracy to commit homicide. Lena and Colby were convicted on all major charges and sentenced to 12 and 15 years respectively. The civil suits took longer to resolve, but eventually Evan recovered most of his assets plus damages. The insurance company paid him a settlement for the fraudulent claim attempts, and Colby's assets were seized to pay his debts to various creditors. including Lenny Dawes. Clara graduated high school with honors and chose to attend college in Oregon, far enough away to start fresh but close enough to visit regularly. She and Evan rebuilt their relationship slowly, with honesty replacing the lies that had poisoned their family. Judith never spoke to Evan again. She blamed him for destroying Lena's life, conveniently forgetting that Lena had tried to destroy his first. But some relationships aren't worth saving, and Evan had learned to let go of people who couldn't see past their own prejudices. 1 year after his resurrection, Evan sold the house in Providence Edge and bought a small ranch in eastern Washington. Clara helped him pick it out during one of her college breaks. "It's perfect, Dad," she said as they stood on the front porch, looking out over rolling hills and endless sky. "Mom would have hated it." "That's how I know it's right," Evan replied. He never remarried. He dated occasionally, but trust was something that had to be earned slowly, and most people weren't willing to invest that kind of time. He was okay with that. Solitude was better than betrayal. Sometimes, late at night, Evan would think about the man he'd been before everything fell apart. That man had been naive, trusting, willing to believe the best about people even when evidence suggested otherwise. That man was dead and buried, as surely as if the truck accident had been real. The man who'd taken his place was harder, more suspicious, less willing to forgive. But he was also stronger, more self-reliant, and impossible to fool. Some people would call that a tragedy. Evan called it survival. 5 years later, on a warm spring evening, Evan was working in his garden when he heard a car pull into his driveway. Clara got out, along with a young man Evan had been hearing about but hadn't met yet. "Dad, I want you to meet someone," Clara called out. The young man, David, Evan remembered, walked over with his hand extended. "Mr. Braddock, I've heard a lot about you. All bad, I hope," Evan said, shaking his hand. The grip was firm, the eye contact steady. Good signs. "Actually, all good. Clara says you're the strongest man she knows." "Strong enough," Evan said. "That's all that matters." They had dinner on the back porch as the sun set over the hills. Clara and David talked about their plans. Graduate school, maybe marriage in a few years, dreams of building something lasting together. Evan listened and offered advice when asked, but mostly he just watched his daughter's face. She was happy in a way she'd never been as a child, free from the toxic atmosphere that had poisoned their family home. After David went inside to help with dishes, Clara sat beside her father on the porch swing. "You did the right thing, Dad. Getting rid of her, I mean." "I didn't get rid of her. I just stopped letting her destroy us." "Same thing." They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies begin their evening dance across the meadow. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just walked away?" Clara asked. "Just divorced her quietly and moved on?" Evan considered the question. "She would have taken everything. The house, the money, probably custody of you. She would have convinced everyone that I was the villain, and Colby would have helped her spend my life savings. And then, when she got bored or found someone with more money, she would have done the same thing to him." "So you saved his next sufferer?" "Maybe. Or maybe I just proved that good men don't have to finish last." Clara leaned against his shoulder. "I'm proud of you, for fighting back, I mean, for not just rolling over and taking it. Some fights are worth having," Evan said. "Even when they change you into someone you never thought you'd be." Later that evening, after Clara and David had driven back to town, Evan sat alone on his porch with a glass of whiskey and thought about the past 5 years. He'd lost a wife, a home, and a version of himself that could never be recovered. But he'd gained something, too. The knowledge that he was stronger than he'd ever imagined. That betrayal didn't have to be the end of the story. That sometimes, if you were smart enough and patient enough and willing to pay the price, you could write your own ending. His phone buzzed with a text from Clara. "Love you, Dad. Thanks for showing me what real strength looks like." Evan smiled and typed back, "Love you too, kiddo. Always." Somewhere across the state, Lena was probably lying in her prison bunk, wondering how her perfect plan had gone so wrong. Colby was probably making new plans to scam his next sufferer, assuming he survived long enough to get parole. Evan didn't think about them often anymore. They were part of his past, a chapter that had ended badly for everyone involved. But the story wasn't over. There were still pages to be written, and this time, he was the one holding the pen. The fireflies continued their dance across the meadow, tiny lights flickering in the darkness like stars that had fallen to earth. Beautiful and brief, but bright enough to matter. Just like second chances, he didn't win, he survived, and sometimes that's enough. The end.